I wanted to start the show with something that I'm sure no one's going to take over the top or get too upset about, to get too crazy with, and it's a simple thing of how do the Hogs get to the college football playoff? How's the pathway there? Because there's some realities where I think we can all agree if Arkansas went undefeated the rest of the way, they finished 10-2. I think we all feel pretty strong about Arkansas's chances of making the college football playoff. That would put them at a record of 7-1 in SEC play, 10-2 overall. They're in the playoff, absolutely. But that's also a tall ask. It's a tall ask for them to even be considered for the playoffs anyways. So the question I'm going to pose to y'all and pose to everybody is, if they are to make it, what's the bare minimum? Like, what's the minimum that they have to do in order to even be considered for a college football playoff appearance?
They damn near have to win out. No, I think they could take, let's see, maybe they could take one loss to Texas. Would that be the one? Or would it need to be something on the road?
I was going to say, I think 9-3 with a loss to Texas would probably have them in contention. Because, I mean, you'd be knocking off a top 15 LSU team, a top 15 Ole Miss team, a top 25-ish Missouri team as well, and just the process of elimination, because a lot of teams would fall. So I think probably, but I mean, I could see the case for other games.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it would either need to be, if you're going to lose one, the Texas game. It couldn't be Missouri, even though that was that might be on the road against a ranked team, but that'd be your last game. You don't want to lose your last game. My other thought, and this would be tough because you'd have a long way to climb, but if you lost to LSU and then won out from there, you'd be on a pretty healthy streak. But I don't know if, boy, it'd be a long way to climb because you probably wouldn't even be receiving votes at that point. I think it'd have to be the Texas game or maybe the Ole Miss game.
I'm a little like looking back. Maybe it's because it's different now, because this is the first time you've had a 12-team playoff. Like, this is the first time ever. So it's going to be different now, where if in those four teams, I don't care what anybody says, when it came down to those four teams, they finagled and massaged the rankings of how they wanted it to be to make those four teams fit. Even if there may have been one team that was more deserving, or one team that, as far as matchups go, they would have put them at the 3-seed or 4-seed. They were able to do whatever they wanted to do. But now that it's 12 teams, there may still be an element of that, but it leaves it open to be teams that may be deserving to get in there. And so I keep feeling like, should Arkansas, if they were going to lose, if they were going to go 9-3, for instance, would it be better for them to lose early, like here soon, and then make up for it at the end because it's so much about what have you done for me lately? Or would it be better to lose to a number one team in Texas, even though that's the third to last game of the year, and then you just win those next two and then you're in? Like, that's what I guess I'm struggling with right now, is trying to feel like, if you're going to lose, if you're going to go 9-3, if you're going to have that one extra loss, what's the timing of it? When's the best part for it? Is it early, or is it against the best team that you face?
I think since you started talking about it again, and I've been thinking about it, I've decided that they don't need to lose early. I think it would need to be the Texas game. If Arkansas came into the season ranked, or let's say they hadn't, lost that Oklahoma State game, which, I mean, they did. But my point is, were they already in the top 25, already, made an appearance in the polls and everything like that, and just had less ground to make up, then I think the path would be lose quick and then get on a roll. But I think they would just kind of be an afterthought if they lost to LSU. So I would go maybe a little bit later on in the season there.
Yeah, the more I think about it as well, the Texas game seems to be the one. But another thing that's a factor in this is, which one, by the way, I guess I should also be the one to say, like, they're not making the damn playoff. Let's be. This is a hypothetical conversation. This is a bye-week conversation. But I will also say that we haven't seen the first playoff rankings, and every year when those first playoff rankings come out, they look vastly different than the AP. And so it might be one of those things, like Curtis, you said Arkansas wouldn't be receiving votes if they lost to LSU, which is true, 100%. But I'm wondering, like, if Arkansas beat LSU and you beat Mississippi State, I can't remember the week when those playoff rankings come out, and say they beat Ole Miss, who's to say those playoff rankings won't come out and Arkansas won't be like 14? You know what I mean? Where then if you lose to Texas, it's like, are you really going to fall down that far? Maybe you fall to 17. But then, you kind of put yourself in a position. I think it's going to be tough for us to have this conversation until we see those playoff rankings come out. So then we have a much better idea of who's where, and, resume and strength of schedule and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's the other part about it too, because let's say that, Florida knocks off Tennessee this weekend, which is not the craziest thing in the world. Probably won't happen, but let's say that happens. But then Tennessee turns around and beats Alabama the next week. And then Tennessee's got a couple losses. Bama's got a couple losses. You beat LSU. They have an extra loss. What if LSU had just beaten Ole Miss? And so Ole Miss has an extra loss. Then you got this big cluster of teams with 2. So, yeah, everything that happens around you would factor into that as well. Let me guys ask you this. If Arkansas won out, if Arkansas did go 10-2, would they make the 12-team playoff?
Yeah, they would.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, because then you're talking about a win over Texas as well, which like who knows what Texas will look like and all that. Also, like I've seen some people kind of thinking like a 9-3 team won't make it. I don't know. In years past, there's always three loss teams that are creeping up towards that 10-12 range. A 2-loss Arkansas team who, the Oklahoma State loss is still going to be an ugly loss, like no matter what. And that's really the reason why like this is a tougher conversation to have. But like Arkansas would be on what, like a 7-8 game winning streak at that point. Cooking. Like a bunch of top 15 wins. And here's the thing, Arkansas still probably wouldn't go to the SEC title game. That would be the key. Arkansas would have to not go to the SEC title game, which would kind of keep them in that like 8-10 range rather than playing, getting another lot. You know what I mean?
Exactly. You would almost want to not go to the SEC title game. Yeah.
Well, because then another one of those teams is going to lose and kind of drop out. So if you have like a 2-loss Georgia team and a 2-loss Texas team and a 2-loss Arkansas team, those two teams play. It's like there's actually kind of a weird thing. In my prediction though, I really do think there's going to be at least one 3-loss team that may not make it, but they're going to be damn close. And I wouldn't be stunned if a 3-loss team made it, and it would have to be from a very powerful conference, obviously.
Well, I looked back and looked at last year in the final college football playoff rankings before, bowl games and all that stuff happened. And right now, you would have, I think it was, at 12th was LSU at 9-3. They were the only team that was sitting at 9-3 that was right there. Arizona was at 13, and the rest of the teams were 10-2, right there in that mix. So if you think that it's so impossible to maybe 9-3, it's unlikely because there are things like a lot of teams that were left out of it that went 9-3. But I just have a hard time believing that a team that went 6-2 in SEC play is what Arkansas would be, with their one loss being to Texas and possibly the second best team, or at least the top 3 or 4 team in A&M by 4 points. I'd be hard pressed for the college football playoff to say, nope, this team is not good enough. I feel like at least when it came to 9-3 teams, you would get the benefit because, you got a bad loss to Oklahoma State. That sucks. But you go 6-2 in the SEC and your 2 losses were to 2 of the best teams in the SEC. I would think you would get that nod. It's not a guarantee, but I think you would. But like you said, Curtis, it also depends on what happens with these other games in the SEC. Because what if you have at the end of the season a bunch of either 11-1 team and then 4 10-2 teams? And then you're 9-3. You're not getting in.
9-3 Arkansas might not get in because they have to take 10-2 Boise State,
right?
Because they're the best group of 5 or whatever.
Yeah, which would be pretty brutal. Because right now, I mean, the only team that's undefeated right now in the SEC, of course, is Texas and Texas A&M and LSU. Texas and LSU have only played 1 game in the SEC, so there's a lot of things that could change there. And Texas A&M and Texas have to play each other. Texas A&M and LSU have to play each other. So there'd be a lot of things that would work itself out. But the point is, and this is really the main reason I asked it, not only because it's a bye-week conversation, but we've had people like Andrew Armstrong's dad saying they ain't losing another game. So I'm like, okay, if that's the confidence level, let's look at it. And if they're not losing another game, if they're going 10-2, they're going to be in the college football playoff. And guys, there's a chance that they're in the SEC championship game.
If they win out, yeah.
If there is a legitimate chance that Arkansas plays in the SEC title game, probably against Texas A&M at that point. So maybe it's a rematch for the making. Man, you talk about a lot of stuff, because that's another thing too. Like if you're Arkansas or you're right there, if you lose the SEC championship game, do you get taken out of the college football playoff? Where it's almost like you'd rather not play in the SEC championship game. So that way you get into the playoff a little bit, like Alabama used to do, getting into the 14 playoff where they just didn't play that extra game. Because that's another thing that plays a lot into the mix. But that's what's going to make it unique, because we've never seen a 12-team playoff and how it works in the SEC. So,
no doubt.
Well, remember that year, I think it was 2007, where you had a 2-loss LSU team made a 2-team playoff, where there was just chaos and anarchy down the stretch. Even 2011, there was a little bit of weird stuff where people just started losing down the stretch. Everyone kind of ends up with 2-3 losses. Like, there's always weird stuff like that that happens. I mean, already 6 weeks into the year, we've seen a lot of upsets. We've seen a lot of teams that we didn't expect to have losses pick up a loss, and a lot of these good SEC teams play each other. I do think, like, it's whether it's this year, next year, or whenever, the SEC is going to have an issue where they have like 5 teams that probably should be in the top 12, but they kind of cancel each other out a little bit. And so I think if you're Arkansas, like, that's your hope, is that you can just be in that mix of slop that of the SEC that's like stuck in that 5 to 15 range.
Yeah, I again, it's so funny. People are like Rob saying, "Everybody's like, I hate this conversation." Haha. I was like, I know you do, but that's what makes it fun, is because it's not going to happen. No one's predicting it to happen, and if it did happen, it would be without doubt the craziest thing we've ever seen in Razorback sports. But it's still fun. It's fun to at least dream about it a little bit. So everybody just relax on it.
Calm down, Ryan.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Do y'all actually think that we're saying we think Arkansas is going to win out? Like, have a brain. Good Lord, dude.
Yeah.
And what happened?
They have a bye week. What do you want us to do? Just like make up stuff? Like, I don't know.
What
We are
happened from
making up
yesterday
stuff.
until now? You know, there's more Kool-Aid being drunk yesterday than I've ever witnessed in my life, and it's 24 hours later, and people are like, "What?
Well, if we
What are you
didn't do
talking
it-
about?"
If we didn't do it, there would be 5 other people that were like, why aren't y'all giving Arkansas props for being a playoff team and blah, 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 you know? So it's like, you know,
Yeah,
that's
you
gonna
all
yell at us no matter what.
You all think that it's a stupid conversation, but man, if they beat LSU at home, you know, dadgum, well, every one of you are going to start really talking about it. Like,
When's the
really
last
talking
time-
about it.
When's the last time Arkansas has been at this point in the season, and you could talk about it with it still being even a remote possibility?
Yeah.
Never. In fact, I
Which,
saw
by the
something.
way, speaking of, you know, just talking about people being mad at us in the chat, you remember how angry everyone was at us after that Oklahoma State game, for how upset we were after the game? And they were like, guys, come on, still a good team. Like, come on. Now, in hindsight, it's like, if you didn't have that Oklahoma State game, this wouldn't even be that hypothetical of a conversation. Because then
Yeah.
you'd be like, hey, Arkansas could maybe even afford 2 losses. They'd be undefeated in SEC, or I guess not undefeated in SEC, but you know, it'd be just one of those things. But yeah, I mean, it's a bye week. Arkansas doesn't have a game. We're talking about a hypothetical.
It's fun. It's just, yeah, it's fun conversation. Because again, you in the matter of the chat, I guarantee you and your buddies in your group text, or you and your buddies at the bar or whatever this week or something, be like, hey man, you know, like, what if they did this? You know, what if they did go win out? Like, you've talked about it and you've thought about it, but that's what makes it fun to talk about. Is it is a hypothetical.
Curtis, by the way, sorry to cut you off again, John. Yeah, as I did like 4 times there. And to your point, Curtis, like, it's this late in the season, and we're still even like able to pretend, which is like that's a win in itself.
Feels good, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you know what's going to be the most Arkansas thing ever though, is that they do go 9-3 and 6-2 in SEC play, and they end up finishing 15th or 14th, right outside the college football playoff, and they look back and be like, that Oklahoma State game, man. That Oklahoma State game kept us out of the playoff. It's just one of those things did not go wrong. You'd be in the playoffs. You'd be hosting a game in Fayetteville, a college football playoff game at Razorback Stadium. I mean, people would be beating the crap out of each other outside of it, just trying to get a ticket to that. So,
Seeing Mike Gundy in your nightmares.
Yep.
As long as you live.
Yep. 100% would happen. But hey, it's fun to dream, and it's fun to talk about and everything. But yeah, and it's also too another reason that, you know, even just to consider it is because the SEC is pretty drunk right now. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
You got Texas A&M at 3-0. I don't think anybody would have guessed that halfway point of the season that Texas A&M would be leading the way pretty substantially in the conference. Nobody probably would have picked that. In fact, the only thing that I think anybody would even come close to saying, like, yeah, that makes sense, is probably Texas being undefeated and 1-0 in conference play. That would be about it. Or definitely not Arkansas at 2-1. Which, by the way, did you guys know that's the first time they're 2-1 since Bobby Petrino was coach? I did not know that.
I believe it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so we're making history here, folks. Another reason to talk about it.
We were talking about it. They hadn't been 2-0 since 2006, so it's like that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, so there you go. In 2011, you would have made the 12-team playoff. So just saying, it's the first time, so it's all coming together. It all makes sense.
Dude,
but yeah,
2015 season, if there had been a 12-team playoff that year, I would have been like, people would have been so angry because you would have looked back at that Toledo game and that Texas Tech game, and you're like, good Lord, dude. Arkansas finished 8-4 or 7-5 actually that year, and had like 4 brutally close losses that they shouldn't have lost.
They should have gone 7-1 that year in SEC play, even without those, because the Mississippi State blocked field goal, and then the tradition, Texas A&M going to overtime when they had a 2-score lead late in the game. It's perfect.
So I don't know if you guys know this or not, or maybe somebody in the chat does. Do the top seeds go to the major conference champions?
Yes.
Yeah, there's auto bids for sure.
So
I don't know if it's the top seeds, but I know it's auto bids.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
I didn't know if it was seeded that way, because in my line of thinking was like, okay, if that happens, then, you know, imagine being the 12 seed and it's like, damn, like you just barely snuck in, but you play a 5 and it's like BYU is the Big 12 champion or something. Like it's almost I mean, it's not a cakewalk, but damn,
Yeah.
it's not too bad. As opposed to being an 11 and you might play the second best team out of the SEC. You might have to go to freaking Georgia or something, you know?
Well, I was trying to think. I'm pretty sure how it's done is that they take the conference champions and then they rank them and those get the first 5 seeds. So it's like, you know, if Texas goes undefeated, they'll be the 1 seed.
So then, okay, so it is like that.
Yeah. And then after that is when they fill in the gaps after that.
Buddy, I'd love to be a 12 seed in this playoff. Give me the Big 12, bro. Whoever it is.
Clint says we lose to BYU at home. Imagine the rematch: Arkansas versus BYU at home, and they lose.
I should have picked any other school, honestly, but yeah.
The best seed would be, I guess, or the most realistic seed would be that 8 seed, because then you'd still be hosting, but you'd host the 9 seed, because those are the only teams that'll host, I guess, is the 5, 6, 7, 8. So that would be the ideal situation. And you know, maybe you play some unique team, whatever it is, but going into it, I think every Razorback fan would be like, oh man, we're gonna win it. I just wonder how much like those tickets would go for, dude. Like how much people would be giving up their life savings to go to a game like that.
Here's my question: is this the biggest variance in the Arkansas fan base between like what fans think can happen? Because we have some fans who genuinely in their heart think Arkansas is about to go 10-2 and actually make the playoff. I mean, you know, Papa Armstrong being one of them. But then we had a commenter yesterday who was like, do y'all still want to keep Pittman if they go 5-7? And I'm like, geez, if 5-7 is still on the table, then
probably not.
Literally
no.
Anything. But I'm like, that's what's crazy is you have some fans who still think this team might not make a bowl game, but you also have some fans who think they're going to play in the playoff. It's like, we've never really had an Arkansas team that has that high of a ceiling and floor where it's like, you could kind of talk yourself in either way. My whole point is the college football playoff, good.
Yes, it is very good. It's very good. And because here's the thing, this wouldn't be a conversation if it was still the 4 team, because we know there's 0 chance Arkansas makes it into the 4 team. But that's what makes the fun thing about 12. And that's why I was a big proponent of 12, is because if you're a Razorback fan, that's your best chance. That is your best chance in football, because you are not going to be the top 4 team in football, probably ever. You're just not. And even in your best years, you weren't the top 4 teams. So 12, your best case and your best chance of making it in there. But yeah, all it takes is a win against LSU. If you win these next 3 games, folks, which I know isn't asking a lot, and I'm not going to predict it, but if you won these next 3 games ending that bye week against Texas, you absolutely are saying we can make the playoff. And that Texas game is going to be electric and crazy. And you're like, we beat Texas, we're in the playoff, which means you'll probably lose to Missouri at the end of the year. Beat Texas and then lose to Missouri.
That first ranking would come out and Arkansas would be 11.
Yeah.
If they beat, they beat Ole Miss or whatever. And I think the ranking comes out before then, but it's it would be hot in the streets.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. It'd be sexy time. It'd be
then
sexy.
Then we'd come back to this video and we'd be like, screw y'all for saying that we couldn't talk about this.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go and clip Andrew Armstrong's dad, and I'm going to be like, listen, dude knows his stuff. He knows ball. He knows the SEC. Give him his